The views and opinions expressed on this broadcast are those of its participants and do not reflect the views and opinions of any employer, MSP, sponsor, advertiser, or vendor. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another All Things MSP Live. My name is Eric Anthony. I'm the host of All Things MSP Live and the host of the Facebook group. If you're not familiar with the Facebook group, you head on over to facebook.com/groups/All Things MSP. Check us out there. 6,000 of your closest friends to talk about everything MSP. Now, all we want to do tonight is talk about 2025. And what I thought I would do is bring together some things that I think are relevant to most MSPs. Now, some of you are doing some of these. Some of you may be doing all of these. I hope so, actually. I hope this episode is completely worthless to you because you're doing all of this. However, having been an MSP myself, I suspect that that's probably not the case. So that's what we're here to do. We're here to help in any way we can to make sure that you have the best 2025 ever. Now, a couple of things I want to do first. I do want to bring up the comments just to make sure that they're working here. And let me go ahead and welcome everybody. There we go. Looks like we got Facebook comments. We got YouTube comments. If you're watching us on LinkedIn, just be aware that you probably can't comment just because of the way LinkedIn APIs and StreamYard works. So if you want to join the conversation, go ahead and head on over to Facebook, or probably the best bet in terms of platforms for watching us live is YouTube. Now, Keith Nelson in the house. And yes, Keith, I agree. Next year does look like it could be a record-setting year. Now, like with all shows, I do have a couple of things to go over first, just in terms of news or things that I think might be helpful to you. Number one is a favorite author and YouTuber of mine, Ali Abdaal. He wrote the book, Feel Good Productivity. There it is hosting a free session, like a webinar, but it's more of a workshop kind of webinar. It's called Spark Your Most Productive Year Yet. And I've attended these in the past when he's gone through and done some goal setting and some alignment and, mission statement type things. And it's really helpful if you haven't been through one of those exercises. You may want to consider doing that. I find them very helpful. And as long as it fits in my schedule, I will be attending that one. All right. And then I do have a little update from Sention, who, of course, we had Zach on the program last week. They did a round of funding. So congratulations to Sention and their round of funding. If you did not get a chance to check out last week's show, of course, it is available on YouTube. Just head on over to youtube.com/allthingsmsp and go to the live section. You'll be able to find all of those videos there. So again, congratulations, Zach and crew, for the fundraising round. Of everything that I've seen of what Sention does, it is an essential piece, I think, to the cybersecurity puzzle and controls that might be of use to your customers. So definitely want to take a look at that. And again, congratulations. All right. And then tonight, Uncle Marv does have a live stream tonight. He has Frank DeLuca from the CTO agency on his show tonight. So, of course, that happens every Wednesday at 8 p.m. or most Wednesdays, kind of like this show. Most Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Following this show, you can just head on over to Marv's YouTube channel and check that out. Okay, so I did promise that tonight we're going to talk about 2025. But of course, this program would not exist without the help of our sponsors. So first of all, we have Easy DMARC tonight. If you have not started the DMARC journey with your clients, it's essential. It really is. It's not an option anymore. SPF, DKIM, DMARC, the whole package is something that is essential to all of your clients. And it's something that you really need to take control of. And as a managed service provider, be managing for your clients. They have a package, a platform that works really great for managing and monitoring the DMARC. And one of the things in terms of clients is that you need to make sure clients understand that DMARC and email security in general is critical to their email deliverability. Let's just put security aside for a second. If their sales emails don't go out, is that a problem? You bet it is. So check out Easy DMARC at atmsp.link/Easy DMARC. And of course, our friends over at MoveBot. Now, MoveBot, you traditionally know them as a file migration tool to go from on-premise or from cloud service to cloud service, whatever it is. Great migration tool, been around for a while. Did you know that they also do email and calendars? So if you're migrating from one cloud provider to another, there is no easier way than with MoveBot. And I think in terms of the way that they handle their migrations and the pre-checks and all the pre-flight stuff that they do, and then the monitoring of what goes on during the migration, if you have these migrations to do, and as an MSP, I know you do because you're moving data, new clients, old clients, whatever it is, moving data from one place to another, check out MoveBot, atmsp.link/MoveBot. All right. Now, thanks again to those sponsors. We really do appreciate them. Let me switch over to another view here so that you guys see less of me and more of the slides. So tonight's session is called Your Best MSP Ever. And Keith, thank you for joining us tonight. Keith is frequently in the comments, and it's the other comment he had earlier was next year looks record setting. I believe that's true for MSPs. I also think that it's good for employees, new cars. Keith, I know how much you like your cars, so yes, that's appropriate. But I also want to point out, Keith made a very good point in that statement, and I don't even know if he meant to, but make it good for your employees too, because your success comes from their work, right? You do a lot of it and you create the opportunity, right? But they're doing the work. They have a critical hand in the success of your business, and you should be treating them that way. So if you have a good year, your employees should be having a good year. So Keith, thanks for that reminder. And Keith did comment on the Sention section and said Zach is awesome, and I have to agree. He was a great guest last week too. We had a lot of laughs, and if you're looking for another show to watch, that is definitely one that you should check out. And Keith also says employee stability is a key component of getting higher rates. Yes. The better you treat your employees, the better value they are to your clients. And of course, then the higher rates you can charge. All right. So what do I mean by having your best MSP ever? Well, there's a lot of components to this, and we're probably going to run right up to time tonight because I want to get through all of this. But one of the things that I want to say is that I created this slide deck off of an idea that I actually have for a workbook. So as we go through this tonight, keep in your mind that this is something that I potentially want to turn into a workbook with a lot more detail and a lot more worksheets for you to actually work through some of these items on. So what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about business foundations, number one, because you can't actually do a lot of this stuff if you don't have a solid foundation in your business to run from. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about your personal productivity, your health and well-being. That has, a lot to do with your success as a business because you're the leader of that business and you need to make sure that you are good. It's kind of like when you're on an airplane and you have to put on your mask before you help other people. You got to do the same thing when you're the leader of a business. Uncle Marv is in the house. Holla, Uncle Marv. We gave you a shout out at the beginning of the show, and we'll make sure we give you another shout out at the end of the show as well. And then we will go into trends, risks, and opportunities in 2025. I have 3 in each category. And I'm gonna, put a little hint in here. I think at least one of them is repeated on all three of those slides. So it's something that if you are not looking into, you probably should. Okay. So building a strong foundation in terms of your business. So I think there's a couple of critical things here. You need to learn to set goals, because goal setting is extremely important to any enterprise, whether it's a business, a nonprofit, whatever it is. Even for your personal life, you should be getting good at setting goals. Financial management, there's some basics there that you need to cover, and probably way more than we're going to talk about in this show, but I'm going to give you just a couple of things that I think are critically important. Client relationships, because you can't do this without clients, folks. You got to have clients in order to do this. And then, of course, team building. I talked about it a little bit when Keith made the comment earlier, and he commented again about employees and said, employee stability is a key component of getting higher rates. And he's absolutely true. He also said later on, after Uncle Marv showed up in the comments, I want to be as cool as Uncle Marv. And you know what? Don't we all? Don't we all? Anyway, so let's talk about this foundation setting a little bit and talk about goal setting. So the reason you want to set goals is because you want to be proactive. And we all have a limited number of resources. So we want to be able to focus the resources we have on the specific items, on the specific goals, actions, and execution that are going to drive the business in the right direction, or our personal life in the right direction. We want to measure that success. It's so important when you set a goal that you are actually measuring your success, because so many of these goals, they take time. This is not something where you set a goal in the morning and you've completed the goal in the afternoon. That's a to-do. That's not a goal. Goals take longer, and you really need to be able to measure the success of them in order to know you're making progress. Because if you're not making progress, you need to change something in order to make that progress. Okay, and then motivate the team. I think this is something that we don't normally talk about when we're talking about goal setting. If you are not sharing the goals and the specific way you're going to focus resources and the way you're going to measure success, you cannot reach your goals as a team without including the team. And I will tell you from personal history that the motivation of the team is directly related to how transparent and how much you involve that team. And so part of goal setting needs to be, how are you going to involve the team so that you motivate them to work towards those same goals? Okay. Another part of it is aligning goals and missions. So you have to decide, what is your why? And this is personal. This is not the business. This is your why as a business owner or as a manager. Why are you doing this? Okay. Because if you don't align your goals with that, you don't have any personal skin in the game. And that's important. You also need to know what the core mission of the business is, because obviously these are business goals. We want to align them to the business, and we need to know what the business is set out to do. What is the mission of the business? And what are your clients' needs? Okay, because obviously clients are the consumers of the end product of the services that you sell. And so what are their needs, and are we aligning that goal to those needs? And lastly, again, what are your employees' needs? Because those are critical as well. Okay, and then for a lot of these that for the goal setting, because again, I'm looking at making this into more of a workbook situation. So one of the things I want to make sure that I include in the workbook is action steps that you're taking along the way. And so the action here is to write a one sentence mission statement for each of the stakeholders that I listed above. Okay, because if you can list a mission statement for each of those, then that's going to go a long way to being able to align with your goals, making sure that your goals align with what everybody needs. Because if the goals are not in alignment with what everybody needs, you're not going to get buy-in. Okay. And buy-in from an employee means that they're not going to be as productive. Lack of buy-in from a client means they're not going to buy your services. And if it doesn't meet the needs of the business and doesn't meet your personal needs, then it's going to fall over as well. Okay. And then looking ahead, what I want you to do is create a SWOT matrix, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this is a little bit out of order because I would actually do this after you decide what you think the trends are for the next year. But at some point, as you're creating these goals, or in really to determine which goals you want to go after, I think that you need to create a SWOT chart uh, showing these, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats so that you can specifically look into 2025 and see which opportunities and which threats that are out there, which ones match your strengths, match your weaknesses. Because what you want to do is you want to come up with goals that will mitigate the threats, take advantage of the opportunities, and maybe turn some of your weaknesses into strengths. And then obviously, the goals that already align with the strengths that you have, those are the ones that are going to be more achievable. And of course, we'll talk about achievable in a second when we talk about how to actually formulate these goals. So be smart about these goals. And of course, everybody knows the acronym here. It's SMART. And this is one of the most popular ways for defining a goal to make sure that it is specific, it is measurable, getting back to that measurement that we talked about before, achievable. It's okay to have what they call BHAGs, right? Big, hairy, audacious goals. There's nothing wrong with that. However, they're not as achievable as a regular goal. I think they're good to stretch you and do things that you may not be in your comfort zone, I guess I'll say. But for a standard everyday goal that you need to achieve, it needs to be achievable. Because if it's a critical component of your next stage of growth, then it needs to be achievable. Or if it's something where you see a threat and you need to overcome that threat or mitigate that threat, then it has to be achievable. Relevant, again, means that it aligns to those mission statements. Everything that we talked about in that last slide is about making it relevant to all the stakeholders involved in that goal. And then, of course, making it time bound, because if you don't make it time bound, it's just not going to matter as much because projects and goals tend to expand to fill the time that you give them. And so if you give them infinite time, they will take infinite time. Now, sometimes it's hard to guess how long a goal is going to take, but you really should put it in a time container so that you can adjust as you're going forward. It's okay to extend a deadline, but don't go into it with that mindset. All right. So your action item here is to create at least 4 major goals based on the SWOT analysis and apply the SMART framework. Okay. So get 4 goals that you know you need to accomplish for next year that come from your SWOT analysis, right? And then create the actual definition, the documentation of this goal using the SMART framework, making it specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. By the way, there are other frameworks. You can use those as well. You don't have to use the SMART framework, but it is a relatively simple one. The other ones tend to be a little more complicated, like the SMARTer framework. But use what works for you. This one has worked well for me in the past. Okay, now financial management. And let's see, I'm going to need to make this a little bit bigger so that I can read it a little bit better, just to keep myself on track. So financial management. And these are some of the 3 things that I think get missed sometimes. Okay. Budget. Okay. A lot of people go into this without creating a budget. And not having a budget is like not knowing where you're starting on a map and not knowing where you want to end up. So the budget is a map of your expenses so that you can plan your revenue strategy. Okay. Because you need to know what your fixed expenses are going to be, what your variable expenses could be. And again, along with those variable expenses, you probably want to know what makes them variable. So, what levers get pulled that cause those expenses to go up or go down so that in the situation you need to control expenses, you already know what those levers are that you can pull to control those expenses and rein them in. And then I put a separate category in here for growth expenses because growth comes at a price. If you don't spend money on growth, you won't get anywhere. And the reason I didn't put this in variable expenses is because it's different. Yes, it's a variable expense, but what you want to do here is you actually want to figure out if I turn the knob and increase the flow of cash into these expenses, these are the expenses that are going to grow my business. Now, the important part here is they need to be predictable. Okay. You need to know how much you turn, what that turns into in growth. These are always harder when I don't have a guest because I have to do all the talking. And then after that, in terms of budget, and it doesn't have to be difficult, right? If you don't have time or you don't have the data to create an ultra specific budget down to the line item, don't worry about it. But you need to get this under control. You need to have a basic idea of what your budget is so that when you're looking at your income every month, you already have an idea of what the outcome is going to be. See what I did there? Income, outcome. But really, expenses are going to determine your outcome, especially when it comes to those growth expenses. And sales goals. If you don't set sales goals, you will never meet them. Okay. If you don't set sales goals, you won't know how much you need to put into growth expenses to get to those sales goals. So they work together. So make sure you're doing, some people call this a forecast, whatever you want to call it. But this is going to drive your growth plan and your budget because once you determine what you want those goals to be, now you got to fill in the blanks of what you're going to do to get to those sales goals. A couple of, things you can do here is analyze your historical performance. If you do what you've done in the past, are you going to grow? How much are you going to grow based on what you've done in the past? That will give you a little bit of an idea that if you turn that up, whatever you did in the past, that you'll get some more results out of it. You also need to evaluate your recurring revenue. You need to know how much you have coming in as a baseline. You need to have pipeline projections. This means, yes, we've said it before, you need to have a sales funnel. You need to have a defined system that takes people from finding out about you at all, being able to find you, engaging with your content, and then engaging with you all the way down to the point where you actually get a sales meeting with them and hopefully you get to convert them into a new client. You need to be monitoring that pipeline and you need to know where everybody in that pipeline is and what the dollar amount of their opportunity is, roughly, of course, in that pipeline so that you can have those pipeline projections so that you can predict what you're going to make next month, the month after, the month after that. Industry trends. This is kind of a fuzzy wuzzy one. And you need to be looking at industry trends to see if there's anything that you can take advantage of to drive new types of revenue growth. These are the new types of services that you might offer, new things. Let's take AI as an example, right? I think there's an opportunity right now to drive policy creation and training and a lot of different things for your clients. They're revenue opportunities. And then some other challenges that I think that a lot of MSPs run into: cash flow. You solve that by establishing a budget and a reserve fund. Okay. If you don't have a reserve fund now, make sure that it goes into that budget. If you have a reserve fund, just verify from time to time, probably every quarter, that based on your general outflow or your expenses, that you have enough reserve funds for your comfort of risk, right? Now, I'm not going to tell you what that is. It could be you want to make sure you have a quarter's worth of expenses in the bank held aside. You may want to have 6 months, a year, whatever your risk profile is, whatever risk is acceptable to you. Keith says, my biggest issue is keeping the negative views when looking at industry trends. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting being somebody who looks at these things. Um, I kind of see both sides, and we're going to get into that when we talk about the trends, the risks, and the opportunities, because I think there are some that are both risks and opportunities. And a lot of times, opportunities look a lot like risk before you turn them into an opportunity. Unpredictability, just measure and monitor your KPIs. Whatever you have, especially when it comes to financial data, make sure you're measuring those and that you're monitoring so that you know whether or not you're in trouble, right? And then profit margin. This is one that can creep up on you because it's very easy for, especially like your stack costs or even your labor costs to creep up slowly on you and you not notice it. So you should be reevaluating at least once a year to make sure that your pricing is in line with what your expenses are and that you're still hitting the profitability or the margin target that you're aiming for, because that's important. If you're not getting the same profitability or margin today that you got at the beginning of this year, you need to reevaluate and you're going to need to raise prices. Of course, we do recommend that you raise prices every year because nothing ever goes down, right? It always goes up. And so your expenses guaranteed went up this year. Of course, when we talk about profit margin and budgeting for your pricing, we always want to make sure that you have somewhere between 10 and 20% probably in your margin that you actually don't count as margin. That is the extra money that you have in there so that you can swap things in and out of your stack and not have to worry about the added cost, because you're going to eat that cost for 5 months, 6 months, whatever it is, until the next price increase. And then you'll account for it again. But in the meantime, you will still have enough profit margin to meet your minimum profit margin requirements. And Keith says that creating a good contingency is paramount. Absolutely. And adding that 10 to 20% to your pricing is just contingency in advance, right? It's making sure that you have the margin there so you never drop below that target margin that you're trying to reach for. All right. Next, client relationships. This is also very important to how your business operates and how your business succeeds. You want to make sure that your customers are always having a good experience with you. Now, we've all heard, the customer is always right. Well, we also know that the customer is not always right, especially when it comes to something as cut and dry as IT, right? And especially these days when it comes to security, right? But there's a lot of things you can do that affect how a client feels about you. You can make sure that you're proactive about communication. This is probably the number one thing that clients will complain about, is that they're just not being told things. They're being left in the dark. There wasn't enough response to a ticket, whatever it is. It's usually around poor communication. And so if you make goals to be more proactive about your communication and measure that, then you can create a better experience. Also, transparency kind of goes along with that communication piece. Outcomes. Are you focusing on solving a ticket? Or are you trying to solve their problem, create a better business outcome for them? If you create better business outcomes, guaranteed, you're going to create a better experience, because they're going to remember an increased profit margin or increased revenue, or being able to handle 10 customers in the same time it used to take to handle 5, those efficiency gains that we can gain with technology. those are outcomes that they are much more likely to remember than you just closing a ticket. And then, of course, the only way you're going to know about that experience is if you get some kind of feedback. CSAT scores, NPS, I don't care what you use your own flavor of survey. My personal preference is NPS, but that's because I just like the simplicity of it. A lot of people don't like it because of the way the math works out, but it's data. You can't really argue with data. And it does make it simple and very less intrusive for them to answer that one single question. Retention. Are clients leaving? Are they shrinking? Do you even know? Right. Now, obviously, with most MSPs, you're going to know if you have clients leaving. That's not a big deal. Plus, there's a whole onboarding process, which, by the way, your onboarding process should be a good experience, not a bad one. I'll just say that. Um, he says his experience, the way he drives customer experience, is his old system is belly to belly and phone calls. And I will tell you that that is an interesting dynamic that we're going to get into a little bit later when we talk about trends. But anyway, clients leaving, you probably know about. Clients shrinking, you might not know. So you do need to measure that revenue churn. Logo, less important, although if you're a larger MSP, you should be measuring logo churn as well, because as a business owner, you may not know if you're losing, especially smaller clients. And again, make that offboarding process a good experience, and make sure you're collecting feedback on why they're leaving or why they're shrinking, so that you can improve those processes and keep that from happening in the future. And then the last one here is expansion. How can you increase revenue per client? Because this is something we always want to make sure that we are improving our overall relationship with our client. And that means finding things that we can do for them and charge them that are going to make their life easier, their business better, whatever it is. So new services, mitigating risk, because things are just getting riskier. They're not getting safer in the IT world. New outcome-based services and projects. And then I think a big one is compliance, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. Team building, this goes back to the employee part. Retention, are these employees engaged? Are they gonna stay with you? Now, I had a conversation with somebody earlier today about employees and retention, and there are so many reasons why an employee might leave that have nothing to do with their experience with your company, right? Spouse moves and they have to move with them. Other things happen in their life and they just have to make a change. But there are some things you can do to make sure that while they're there, they are as productive as possible. Salaries and benefits in range, fair and open work environment, right? You don't want to have a lot of closed door meetings with some employees and not others. It just creates a bad culture. Um, Growth opportunities. You want to make sure that you're offering them growth opportunities in terms of training, doing more for your business. And here's the key, right? If you have employees that can now do more, they can bill out higher. Okay. They can do more profitable things. And so the growth opportunities that you give them are going to relate back to the business growth. And so I think it's important to do that for the business, not just for the employee. And then burnout. One of the problems that we have in this fast paced, when things go bad, they go really bad, and we need to fix them really fast if possible. Burnout is a thing. So keep an eye on it. Make sure that your employees are getting the right amount of downtime, because if you don't, they're not going to be as productive on the job. Speaking of productivity, are they doing their best work? Do they have an organized work area? And this is partly on them, partly on you, right? Do you give them everything they need to stay organized? But again, on their side, are they keeping it organized? Flexible work arrangements. This can vary, right? Because you do have to have different times. You have to have coverage for your help desk and everything. But be as flexible as you can, because life is tough, and they need a little bit of flexibility sometimes. Make sure they have the right resources and tools, the right knowledge. And of course, that goes back to training. When I put these two in here, knowledge is more about making sure that they have all the information available to them, not necessarily the book knowledge or the training. And that's why I separated the two out. Client outcomes, are the employees aligned with client outcomes, or are they just ticking boxes? Make sure that your employees understand the client businesses at least a little bit, at least, a cursory, what's important to that client. Share the QBR discussions that you have with your clients, with your employees, so that they get that background information that you pull out of a QBR. And make sure that you're sharing the client feedback with them as well, not only when that individual employee does a good job on a ticket or a project for that client, but the feedback that the client has overall for the business, so that when you set goals and you do things around the business, they understand you're not just doing it for no reason. You're doing it because clients are asking for it. Okay, now we're going to go into kind of the personal growth and efficiency piece of this. Um, and this, again, it goes for everybody, not just business owners. And we're going to talk a little bit about time management. We're going to talk a little bit about wellness and a little bit about work life balance, which I hate the terminology work life balance, but it's what everybody else uses. And so, in order to name the topic, I decided to do the same. So, time management, and you've heard me talk about this before. I love a solution called time blocking, but here's why it's important, right? Because we're in a business that typically has a lot of interruptions. And so you have to account for those interruptions. I know. How do you account for something that's really unaccountable? But bear with me. Um, we have a reactive workload a lot of times, AKA those interruptions, but it's not just interruptions. Your reactive workload could be that you are driving, um, down a ticket, you're working on a ticket and something changes, or you realize that something's going to take twice as long as it was supposed to because, a migration is running slow because you didn't use MoveBot, whatever it is. Um, so that can change. Lack of delegation. Okay. Lack of delegation is a big one when it comes to, uh, you know, not handing things off to other people. Now, I will caveat this with, I know a lot of MSPs that are single member MSPs, and you can't delegate to anybody. Well, you kind of can, but you kind of can't. If you are a little bit advanced at this, you might be able to outsource some of the things, but that doesn't always work well either. So a lot of times you just have to figure out um, how you're going to either delegate this out to an automation, another person, or how you're going to fit it into your schedule. And then overcommitting, we all do this. Come on. We all over or underestimate how long things are going to take us, and then things run over. One of the best things I have found with time blocking is that I have gotten better at estimating the amount of time it's going to take me to do certain things. And so by doing this for a period of time, you'll actually get better at that. So your action item here is to start using the time blocking methodology for taking control of your calendar and assigning real time to your tasks. Now, you're going to ask, well, Eric, if I do that, how am I allowing for those interruptions? If you are a single member MSP, probably just taking 9 to 5 and assigning it to doing tickets, to doing the actual work in the business. Now, you can try and delegate some of that time during the 9 to 5 for other things. Just realize you might get interrupted. So have some flex time in there, right? But a lot of it, I actually recommend if you're a morning person, get up and do those business tasks, those non-service delivery tasks early in the morning. If you're a night person, save them for after dinner, after family time. Just depends on you personally, how you work. But if you actually set all of that stuff up to make sure you're assigning time to the right things, you'll get more done. And in terms of work-life balance, again, you are blocking time for personal stuff as well. So if you know you need to spend time with the family, block it off on the calendar. Make it, unmovable. Okay. If you need to spend time working on your yard, you know, block that as well, especially if it's not on a Saturday or a Sunday. But I find I actually block my time on Saturday and Sundays now because I find it to be just so much more productive. And there's a lot of other resources where you can see exactly how to do time blocking online. There's lots of YouTube videos about it. So I encourage you to watch some. And my number one productivity tip is to do time blocking. All right, we've got a comment from Uncle Marv. It says work-life balance begins with work. Yeah, that's probably one of the problems with the whole phrase because your life is more important than your work. I know there's going to be some people who disagree with me on that, but life belongs before work, so it should be life-work balance instead. And again, when we're talking about wellness, super important to make sure you are making time for the things that are going to take care of you first. Again, putting your mask on before you help other people. Okay, prioritizing sleep. This comes down. Now we're into the actual health and wellness piece. Prioritize sleep. Eat for energy, not just to eat. I know a lot of us, we like, and I'm not exempt, right? We eat for a lot of other reasons besides energy. Um, Food is our fuel, right? And that's exactly how we should treat it. Now, I'm not going to say you shouldn't go out to Ruth's Chris every once in a while and live it up because you absolutely should, because there's some mental wellness that goes along with that perfect steak and helps you to manage the stress. You got to manage stress. If you're not managing your stress, it'll manage you and it'll take a pretty big chunk out of your health as well. And then I like this one personally, continuous learning, because I still at my age, I'm a sponge. I love to soak up new information and learn from other people and then hopefully share it with you guys. My action item here is to learn more about each of the areas above to create an action plan based on that research. Because I always encourage you to do your own research because you're different from me. Everybody's different from everybody else. So do your own research so you become educated on these things. And then also make sure that you are employing a physician's advice because they can run diagnostics. They can do things to tell you things that you don't know and that may have a bearing on the research that you've done. All right, got a couple of comments from Keith. Says, I always schedule, including with employees, family first. You do not miss kids' games, practices, dance, school events, including birthdays, anniversaries, etc. We are not superheroes saving the world. Now, Keith, there are some MSPs who would argue with you. I do not. I think you are 100% correct. And the same reason I put life-work balance, as Marv pointed out, I think that's the right order. You put those things first. And so those things should be the first things you block out on your calendar and you fit the work around it. And then Keith says, just let customers know you care and will respond, but do not disrupt your life. And that goes back to the communication piece. A lot of them will be perfectly happy if you tell them when you're going to get to it. Okay. Putting them off and not telling them anything, that's what makes them mad. But if you go ahead and tell them that you have blocked time at X and, such and such a date and time to work on their problem, then that's the time you've set aside. Now, we all know emergencies happen. However, they still should not interrupt your personal life. Okay. We talked about work-life balance already. And, for when I redo this, I think I actually am going to switch that and have it say life-work balance. It's not about balance. It's about assigning the right amount of time to the right things. Okay. You need to define your on and your off hours. specifically, I would define your off hours first. Now, that's not to say that, you're just going to go ahead and block out Thursday afternoons because you want to, right? There needs to be something specific that you're doing with that time. And again, when we talk about running a business, we have to have help desk coverage. We have to have people in seats at certain times, but we need to work with them as much as possible. Uncle Marv says a good balance puts life first when needed, but also work first when needed. And I think that's, kind of goes back to assigning the right time to the right things. But again, it's about assigning it, right? It's making sure that, yes, the client crises happen and you need to assign time to those. But then you also need to assign time to the personal stuff because, again, we talked about earlier with time-bound goals that if you just leave it open, work will expand to fill the container. So if you don't contain it, you're just going to let it boil over and it's going to eat into personal time, especially if you don't protect that personal time. And learn to say no if it doesn't fit. If something doesn't fit in your schedule, don't be afraid to say no. And you know what you can say no to and what you can't. Okay. You don't need to prove that to anybody else. And then, of course, the action here, and this, yes, I'm trying to be funny, is this is all about time blocking. It works. Trust me, because it does. It makes a huge amount of difference. All right. So lastly, this is our last section for this evening, preparing for the future. And unfortunately, Uncle Marv has left the building because he's got to go get ready for his show. And let's see, Keith says, have the correct staff, charge enough to do the job correctly. Yes. So this comes down to if you want the kind of business where you have enough people to cover everything and not have to worry about those client crises, you need to be charging enough to afford that amount of people. So again, this goes back to budgeting, right? Make sure that you have the right amount of people to deliver the service the way you want to deliver it at the profit margin that you want to deliver it for. And it's all, it's just math, people. It's just math. Go back. It's algebra. I'm sorry. Yes, we're going to bring high school math back into this, but that is where you will use your algebra. Okay. Now maybe I'll break it down into some formulas and give you some spreadsheets to use later, but it's just math. So use it. Okay, so we're going to talk about trends, risks, and opportunities that I see coming up in 2025. Yours could be different because MSPs are different, regions are different, all kinds of things are different in this wild, crazy MSP world that we love to live in. So artificial intelligence, I couldn't it's one of the biggest trends going out there. A lot of people think it's just a hype cycle. And I would say that in terms of generative AI, that is a little bit true because everybody is figuring out how to put generative AI into their product and slapping a label on it that says AI. And that's where it kind of becomes hype. However, it is actually a pretty good tool for a lot of different kinds of roles to use. And so it shouldn't be discounted. And there's other things as well. There's agentic AI popping up, which is very interesting to me. I haven't had a lot of chance to look into it. I've had some conversations with some people who know what they're talking about, because I certainly don't, about agentic AI and how they're using it to kind of spin up virtual teams almost to solve a problem or take on a project. And there's going to be a lot more agentic AI that you're going to see coming out in 2025. And there's also a lot of embedded AI that's popping up in the products that we use every day to try and augment those products and make them more efficient for us to use. And they're not just popping up in enterprise, right? One of the interesting things about the cost and the scalability of AI is that it has invaded the SMB world much faster than some other technologies that may have started in the enterprise space and slowly migrated their way down to SMB because of things that were so accessible, like Chat GPT and Copilot and Gemini. It's available in Google, it's available in Microsoft 365, and OpenAI has a free version of Chat GPT. So people who normally would have had a barrier to that technology because it would have only been available because of the price point or complexity to the enterprise space was almost immediately available to the SMB space. But clients need, help navigating the good and the bad of AI. Compliance requirements. There are new regulations coming out all the time, and some are getting more teeth than ever, especially like HIPAA. And there's also some new ones coming out. Do you have CPA clients? Do you have car dealerships? Did you know that they have to adhere to FTC regulations? Hey, I managed for a good 30 minutes before I needed to clear my throat on that one. Yeah, so these new regulations for what are typically small to maybe medium-sized businesses, especially in the case of car dealerships, there's these FTC compliance rules that they now have to adhere to. And it's definitely a place where the MSP can help out. Now, I alluded to this one earlier, and this came out of a conversation that I had with Jay McBain from Canalys at IT Nation. If you don't know Jay, he's probably one of the foremost analysts in this industry, in the channel industry as a whole, not just MSP. And we were talking in my interview with him at IT Nation, that'll probably drop sometime this week, by the way, that by sometime in 2025, the most prolific or the most common buyer of IT services in the SMB space, or pretty much in any space actually, will be a millennial. Now, I'm not trying to create generational divides here, but here's the difference. They research and they buy very differently. And are you ready for that? In old school sales, sales to people like me and the generation just older than me is, it used to take 5 to 10 touches is what we used to call it to make a sale. Anybody want to venture a guess what the new number is for the number of, they're not even touches anymore because they have nothing to do with the person selling the service. It's moments. Moments is what they're calling them. It takes 28 moments for a millennial buyer to buy a significant purchase. Okay. Now, one of the keys to these moments and why they're moments and not touches is that most of those moments, the vendor selling the product has no idea and no way to track that moment, because that millennial buyer is watching YouTube videos, looking at blog articles. They're doing a lot of research that does not include a platform or piece of content that involves or is gated by that vendor. So you have to have all of that out there in the ether, in the cloud, even though we know it's just somebody else's computer, to make sure that they can find your content. They can find things about you. And the other thing about this is, if you have a lot of negative stuff about your company out there, then this is going to be something that is hard to overcome. And you really need to be proactive about putting enough positive content, true positive content, because if it's not true and it's positive, you're going to get called out on it, which is even worse. So again, new millennial buyer, you got to work on making sure those moments are available, accessible, and findable to those new millennial buyers. All right, risks, because then, we always want to talk about the good stuff last. So I left opportunities for last. Cybersecurity. Threats aren't going away, folks. In fact, they're getting worse. And AI is one of the reasons they're getting worse. Not just from a, uh, you know, AI and just putting data out there into large language uh, models is a risk, but you know, the threat actors are actually using AI to accelerate their attacks. And so there's a lot of different things that are out there around cybersecurity. And if you're not in the mode of making sure that you have a cybersecurity minimum, you need to get there. And you do need to make sure that it aligns with some kind of framework, whether you use NIST or CIS or whatever. Just make sure you're using something and that you have a minimum level of cybersecurity for clients that if they won't take it, you won't be their vendor. Okay. Compliance. Again, we talked about this a little bit before when we were talking about trends. And when I talked about trends, you know, it's just that they're increasing all over the place. The risk truly comes in when a client doesn't understand that they have compliance rules that they need to follow. And a lot of times, even though they are more industry experts than you are, they're not experts on the controls that it takes to comply. And so they need somebody who understands the controls for whatever framework they need to adhere to or whatever compliance regulations they need to adhere to. So that's a risk because there can be some stiff fines that all the way up to and including the closure of the business, right? So you want to make sure that as a trusted advisor, and I know we all hate that term, but that is the role that a lot of you play when it comes to MSPs. You need to make sure that if they're in an industry that has compliance, you are researching that and you are coming back to them with some kind of solution. Economic stability. This is just one that's always there. I think the difference now is that because the economy moves at such a fast pace, that it is much more of a danger than it's ever been before because the unpredictability comes about faster. And so you have to be able to react faster. And so that's a risk that I think is mainly mitigated by having that contingency fund. So that's, you know, again, a way to mitigate that risk. And then opportunities, AI. I think there's a ton of opportunities in here around policy creation and training, safe use of AI, which kind of falls in that training piece as well. Tools and add-ons that help enhance your client productivity. Okay, kind of taking on a little bit more of a CTO role there and finding technologies that actually drive business outcomes for them, and tools to enhance your service delivery. There are tools out there where they didn't just slap an AI label on it. They actually made something that helps you as an MSP. Compliance management. So did you know that CMMC level 1 is self-assessed? What if you came up with an offering where you figure out what CMMC level 1 self-assessment looks like? You take it to a client and you say, we will help you with this assessment and we give you a process and everything. And we go through all the things, the checklists, and we'll do this once a year for you to make sure that you're not just depending on some internal employee to do it, but from an IT technology standpoint, we're coming in and we're actually doing these assessments with you so that you have a third party who says, yes, this is a self-assessment, but we had a third party familiar with technology, familiar with IT and the rules to come in and help with this. And level 1, you know, it's not very complicated. I think it's like 17 controls. And this is for the people who have contracts with maybe other vendors to the DoD. Maybe it's the guy that cuts the lawn at the manufacturing plant that, you know, supplies a special kind of coating or a piece of hardware to the DoD, right? So these are low security situations, but it's absolutely an opportunity. Privacy requirements, those vary by state and region. You got GDPR over in Europe. You've got the individual state privacy laws over here in the States for those states that have them. You have FTC, like I mentioned before, for CPA and dealerships, and cybersecurity insurance assistance. And I say assistance because this is not something that you're actually going to sell them or even probably recommend cybersecurity insurance, right? But you are going to help them make sure that they are staying compliant with whatever cybersecurity insurance they have. There's also several organizations out there that I would recommend you check out when it comes to cybersecurity insurance and helping people manage this. SeedPod Cyber is one. They were one of the finalists in Pitch It 2024 this past year. Cork is another one. There's lots, there's several more that I just aren't coming to mind right now that can help you kind of with that and turn it into a revenue generating opportunity, in addition to just being good for your client. We're not trying to sell the client something they don't need. It's something they absolutely need that benefits them and benefits you. And then business outcome based services. This is something that we talk about a lot lately, is business outcomes. Be that fractional CTO. Go in and find out what technologies are going to help move their business forward, from efficiency to profitability to revenue, whatever it is. Tech risk management, that kind of falls in the same bucket as the cybersecurity insurance. And then productivity enhancement. There are lots of things that you can do to help them with their productivity. There's a great new tool that I like. They're also a sponsor of the show, in full transparency, called Produce 8. And basically, it's a productivity coach for your employees. Now, the employees get productivity coaching and data on how they're working, okay? Also tracks kind of how they feel about their work, etc. The benefit to you or your client is that the client gets to look at the aggregated data across all of their employees. It's anonymized, so it takes away kind of that big brother kind of thing. But yeah, definitely, is one of those things that I think MSPs, because of the technology piece, definitely have a opportunity to provide that service. Keith is chiming in with, spend the time knowing your customer's business, including their lingo. Extremely important, Keith. And you and I have had this conversation a lot. Keith's company won Boeing simply because he understood lean and shop flow workflows. And that's absolutely true. The more you can speak to a customer about their business, the better they're going to trust you with that business. And IT is not just a computer on a desk anymore. It is intricately, I don't even know if that's a word, and critically tied to their business operations, and it needs to be treated that way. All right, so make sure you're getting your finances in order. Make sure you're aligned with your clients and your employees. Identify your opportunities and risks for 2025, and then set those goals to take advantage of the opportunities and mitigate the risk so that you can have your best MSP year ever. Was that a good ending? I hope it was. Anyway, thank you so much. I don't know why the font screwed up on that. It had something to do with importing it into StreamYard. Interesting. I'll have to fix that for next time. Well, we are over time. And if you are not done watching MSP content for this evening, make sure you go over to Uncle Marv's IT Business Podcast. Check out the guest, Frank DeLuca, tonight from the CTO Agency. Thanks again, and we'll see you later. Hey, thanks for watching All Things MSP Live. You can reach me, Eric Anthony, at eric@allthingsmsp.com. If you're a guest, if you're a vendor, if you want to sponsor the show, let me know.